welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Peason. I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Indeed we are, and we're especially glad to be doing a special edition of LOA Today. This is going to be shared into the general stream of things, probably closer to Christmas, because we always have a couple of days where we're not recording, like Christmas Eve and so forth. So we'll be slipping it in there, but it'll also be available on social media before then. But we have a special guest. I have a special guest, Deasha Waddup. Am I pronouncing your name right, Deasha? I hope I am.
Yeah, you nailed it. Well done.
Cool. All right. I mean, there have been some really embarrassing times here on the show trying to get names right. There was one young woman who was a wonderful guest. I couldn't pronounce her name was Shangela. I kept insisting on calling it Shangela. And she was like, no, it's Shangela. Like, oh, geez, why am I doing this?
I get it all the time. I'm so used to all sorts of variations. And when you spell my name, unfortunately, it also autocorrects to death. So,
oh, great. That makes it fun. Yeah.
So I've had some interesting emails as well. And then clients instantly respond back going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't spell check it before I hit the send button. I'm like, it's fine. Don't worry.
Well, you have a good sense of humor about it. That's a great thing.
Yeah, I'm used to it.
I know what you mean. I have similar, I think we all have similar things that go on in our lives. I'm a very tall man. So, I mean, I'm constantly getting the tall jokes and the tall comments. So yeah. Same kind of thing. But anyway, you are a social marketing expert.
Yes.
And I was particularly interested and intrigued because you advertise yourself and you actually have the background to prove it as someone who knows how to grow Facebook groups, which has actually been a topic here on the show lately. And I don't know what you know about the show. The show is generically about the law of attraction. But since the law of attraction applies to everything in life, well, it's pretty much about everything in life. That's what we talk about here on the show.
Yeah.
And lately we've been talking about, I mean, generally when you have people who are interested in the law of attraction, they generally become interested for one of three reasons. I mean, there are a lot of reasons, but there's like three main categories. First one is they're looking to increase their financial situation. Second, they're trying to improve their relationships. Third, they're trying to improve health situations. Those are the big three. And we've been talking about the financial side lately. And it's one thing to attract stuff into your life, but you also have to sometimes take some action to go along with it. And that can be confusing for a lot of people. So that's why we've been kind of addressing this topic lately. What are the different ways we can do the real world side of the LOA? And when I saw that you were an expert at growing Facebook groups, I said, whoa, we got to have her on the show. So first, you got to give us a little background. Tell us about yourself, and then let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, so I am a social media business coach and consultant. I help businesses all over the world to grow and scale social media followings. I started my business in 2016, originally as a social media manager, working with 6- and 7-figure business owners to grow and scale their social media organically. And I transitioned to coaching and helping other entrepreneurs in 2019 when I realized I am an outgoing person, and sitting behind a screen wasn't going to fit with my personality. So
gotcha.
I needed to get out there and be the face of things a little bit more than being behind the scenes. So I transitioned to coaching, and I have been working on building my own groups and helping other people to build their own Facebook groups. I'm a Facebook lead trainer, so I deliver training on behalf of Facebook nationally across the UK. Oh. And the She Means Business campaign, which is a campaign run by Facebook to deliver training to small to medium businesses across the UK as well. So that has been fantastic, although we haven't done anything live for quite some time because Facebook have banned any live events, but nevertheless.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people have been dealing with that, but I understand.
Yeah, so Zoom is our friend. Zoom is our friend right now.
Absolutely. Zoom and StreamYard and all the different online media for connecting with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I I closed an old Facebook group at the start of 2020 because it didn't serve me any longer. And I started my new Facebook group. And in the last 18 months since April 2020, when I launched it, I've grown it to 1.8 thousand people and made over 6 figures from the people inside of the Facebook group.
That seems mind-boggling to a lot of people. Particularly, I mean, we have people within our audience. We have a fairly decent audience, probably around 600 plays an episode, something like that. But we have some people in the audience who are entrepreneurial. They have their own stuff going. We have a lot of other people who have never gotten stuff going for a variety of reasons. People feel blocked about stuff. They have fears about things. Yeah, I mean, the usual reasons. But in all cases, the idea that you can actually make a lot of money doing something like a Facebook group seems frankly bizarre, especially since, I mean, there's like a piece of us that says, well, we know Facebook makes their money, from selling advertising and so forth. Well, how could they allow people to be making money on their platform? It seems almost counterintuitive on one level. We know it really isn't true, you and I, but that's one of the things that kind of people run into. So talk about that for a second.
Yeah, it's funny. People have a massive misconception around Facebook. Yes, it is a business, and yes, they want you to run ads, but their also massive focus is on communities. So they even ran ads in, what's that big game that you guys have over in the States around the big football game every year? Anyway,
the Super Bowl.
That's it. They ran ads. That's the one. They ran adverts in the middle of the Super Bowl, which would have cost them millions of dollars. To advertise Facebook communities. They've just launched a Facebook community certification this year. So I'm one of the first 1,000 certified Facebook community managers across the world.
What does that mean, by the way? I hadn't heard of that one.
Yeah, so Facebook have a certification process that anybody can access, and you can go through this. It's called Facebook Blueprint is the certification process. You can access all the course material for free, and then you just pay to do the exams. So the exams are around £100, so probably about $150-ish to actually do the exams, and then you are certified by Facebook. And you can they've just launched the community management exam, which shows, again, the focus on communities and community building. They also have different ones on adverts, on marketing, and a whole bunch of different versions, developer versions, and all sorts of things you can get stuck into. So do go and check out that. And that's what I train for them on behalf of them.
Okay.
So you can access all of that stuff for free and then become certified. They are massively pushing the algorithm. So every post on inside of your Facebook group is 100% more likely to be seen than anything you post on a business page. So from that side of things, it's much better. They have been working on rolling out over the next few months, and a lot of people in the States have already got some of the tools that because you guys get everything before we do.
Yeah, that's what happens when you live in the same country as Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've been rolling out a lot of tools that are going to help the Facebook community managers over the next few months worldwide. And they've just hosted their first community summit, which was a international event that they hosted partly in the metaverse as well, which was pretty cool because it was just before it was officially launched. And they had a community of Facebook community managers all over the world that were able to access that content that would go into the changes and things that are happening inside of communities. So communities really are where Facebook are heading everything towards. And if you can create a community around what you offer and help people with, then you're going to have massive success.
Now, it sounds exciting on the one hand. On the other hand, it sounds terrifying.
Right?
Doesn't it? Because there's so much. I mean, all the things. First of all, there's just the verbiage, right? You listed all these things, and I can just see a whole bunch of people with their eyes glazing over, like, what are we talking about here? Right?
Yeah. There's so many different things that you can do inside of a Facebook group. I've seen people monetize memberships from Facebook groups, or I've just launched a membership which starts next year. But most of my income has come from coaching, one-on-one coaching, and courses that I provide for people. So,
okay. And that's a popular thing. That's something that is a very common way of using groups.
Yeah, absolutely. The key thing is providing value. That's what people want. They want to learn from you. And if you can have a common goal with your business, whatever your business is. So I've seen people create Facebook groups out of absolutely anything. And as long as your ideal clients have a common interest, you can create a Facebook group around it.
I proposed an idea when I interviewed someone else in November who was also a marketing expert. I proposed the idea to her that literally you could come up with any interest, any topic, anything at all that you would like, and find a way to turn it into a group and monetize it. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anything.
So
Anyone.
knitting, you could create a knitting group and you could monetize a knitting group.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the case studies that Facebook uses is actually a peach van.
And, a peach van. Okay.
Yeah, they sell peaches from a van. And they created a Facebook community around people that wanted to bake or use peaches in cooking.
Okay.
So it was a Facebook group that was just around using peaches in cooking and sharing recipes and sharing ideas on how to use these peaches in cooking. And it meant that then as the peach van, they were then known within everybody, within the thousands of people, for selling their peaches. And then the van took off and they built shops, and it got huge from that.
That's mind blowing. And I have heard of other things too, but it's good to bring these examples out. I'm not sure this was actually a Facebook group, but I heard one time about a gentleman, I think he was actually from the UK, who loved clouds. And so he made, it was either a group or it may have been his own website. He made this setup for people who wanted to upload pictures of clouds, and he charged them for uploading pictures of clouds. Like, you gotta be kidding me, but he made millions doing it.
Yeah. There is somebody for everybody. Like, there is a niche for everything, and everybody will pay for something, right? The thing is, you have to give people what they want. And that is something that I talk a lot to my clients around, is selling people what they want, whatever that is. Because I use this example a lot, but in fitness, for example, people want to lose weight.
Interesting you mentioned fitness. The person I mentioned was a fitness pro. So,
there
perfect.
You go. Yeah. So people want to lose weight, right? They want to get skinny or tone up. What they need to do is stop eating the cake.
Yeah, that helps.
Right? But people don't want to buy that. They don't want you to tell them to stop eating their cake. They want you to tell them how they can do it and still eat the cake.
Right. Of course.
That's what they're gonna engage with. And that's the thing, right? That's how you get more engagement inside your Facebook group, by delivering people what they want to hear from you. And I've had this come up with, a client recently where she wanted to talk about boundaries and setting boundaries in your life. And she said, but people keep telling me they don't need boundary setting. They need to know how to time manage, or they need to know how to set self-care goals. And she was like, but it's all boundary setting. And I said,
it is.
Right?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but people don't want boundary setting.
That's right.
They need it to do everything they want to do. So start talking to them about what they want, because they'll engage a lot more if you start saying, okay, we're going to focus on time management or self-care goals. Funnily enough, you need to set boundaries to be able to do all of these things.
Yeah, how about that? Right.
Yeah, but that's what they're going to engage with and create content around, if that's what they want rather than what they actually need, which is the boundary setting.
We're making fun of it, but this is actually a really key concept: the creation of content specifically oriented toward the person you're creating the content for. And I say that's really key because the way most of us create content, we create content based on what we think we would want, which is not necessarily the same thing, is it?
No, exactly. And I encourage all of my clients to ask their audience what they want to hear from them and actually listen. And when I say actually listen, like, write down the words that they use and use those exact words in the content that you're creating and what you're delivering. Because then if you pick up and you say, oh, well, I know a better word to use, then you're not listening to your audience, and then they're not seeing the connection. Whereas if you use the exact language that they're using in how you convey that offer, that thing to them, then they're going to be like, oh my God, it's like she was in my head.
Right.
How did she do this? She knows exactly what I want. I'm like, just because I was listening. I was actively listening and looking at the words and the language that you were using, and I just used it back in the copy that I created. And
I'm sorry, you used an interesting phrase there. You said, ask them. And I know in most people's minds, I think probably in my mind too, if I get up the courage to ask, what is it that you're looking for? Very likely I'm going to get crickets back, because people usually can't answer a question that direct. So how do you get that information out of people?
So you have to be specific. And I remember that when people are on Facebook, they usually sat on the toilet, making the coffee, on the school run, like not actively engaged. So if you ask somebody what they want, they're like, whoa, I don't know. That's a big question. And
yeah, I think I'll just skip that one next.
Right? But if you said, what do you want for dinner tonight? Oh, yeah, I could answer that. That seems doable. So you have to be specific and short-winded with your questions that you're asking people. So for example, I'm doing a challenge later today, and I asked in my group, what questions do you have about running live challenges or masterclasses inside of your group? So I've had 6 comments of people telling me what they want to hear, and I just use that language in the masterclass that I do this afternoon, because then they're like, oh my God, she knows exactly what I wanted. Because I asked you and you told me.
Yeah.
Wasn't rocket science.
It's true. It's not rocket science, but we also have short-term memory losses. So
Right?
That's why that kind of thing works.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating thing, though, how when you can, well, there's usually like, how do I describe it? There's like a threshold you have to exceed in order to get somebody to respond to an inquiry like that. And one of the ways you're describing to get past that threshold is to be specific. In other words, to narrow it down so that it becomes an easy question to answer rather than a hard question to answer. One of the more popular ways I've seen to do that recently is, people have been using this with a lot of success on Facebook, is they'll ask, which of these 3 options do you like best? Or true or false? Or they'll say something that's patently, obviously wrong to give the people the opportunity to correct it, something along that line, something that's very easy for somebody to give their response on. Because quite honestly, people feel better when they can come off as being the knowledgeable one, right? Whoops. We got a freeze there?
Am I back?
Are you there? Oh, there you are. Hello. We froze for a moment there. Okay.
No? Yeah, there you are. Sorry.
I'm guessing, that's all right. I'm guessing you didn't hear the question, so let me try it again. Let's see if I can remember it. It was very long-winded. One of the things that I've seen a lot on Facebook is, as a way to narrow down the question, make it easier for the question to be asked and answered, is to do things like ask a true or false question, which could go either way. You know, you could choose true or you could choose false, and then people can give their opinions on it. Or you could, one of the ones that are really popular lately, they'll put out a statement that's patently, obviously false. Like, I'll bet you can't come up with a word that begins with C and ends in E. And of course, 25,000 people come up with words that begin with C and end in E. So they make the questions almost absurdly easy for somebody to answer. But it seems like that's kind of what you're driving at. The specificity of the question is really about, can we make it an easy question to answer?
Yeah, and that is the key thing, to make sure that it's easy and that people can answer it whilst they're doing other things, because people aren't sitting and writing War and Peace whilst they're on the toilet running the kids to school or making coffee.
Yeah.
Right?
And it took Leo a long time to write that one.
Exactly. So you have to keep it really short and concise and get to the point. And the same with I use a content method called what I call trigger content, and it is basically content that I use to piss people off. And
oh, you must be loved, let me tell you.
Right? But essentially, it is educating those that are my people, that I'm for them, and annoying those that I don't want to work with anyway enough to have them unfollow me or go somewhere else. Because
interesting strategy. That almost sounds risky, actually.
Yeah, it is risky if you don't know who your ideal client is and who you want to work with. And if you're trying to work with everyone, which never works. So if you are specific about who you want to work with, then it works really nicely, because you are sharing your values and your information in a way that is targeted just to those people. And those people who align with that are like, oh my God, yes, that you're speaking to me. That makes total sense. I'm 100% in. And those that don't like it and don't want to put in the work, whatever it is that you posted about, they're like, oh no, I don't believe you. I don't know. You're not my person. I'm like, okay, that's cool.
That's the beauty of social media, because you can lose 25,000 of those and get another 1,500 of the ones that you like, so it works out okay.
Exactly, right. And one of the things I talk to my clients about a lot is working with people that you love. Because that's something that we went into business for, or certainly I went into business for, was to not have to work with clients that I don't like.
Yes. Oh, and they eat you up so much time and energy and money and everything else.
Right. So when I worked in corporate, I worked for a digital marketing agency, and I ran national campaigns for a national insurance company. And it was an insurance company that did insurance for motorbikes. Okay. Which, if you know me, I have absolutely zero interest in insurance or motorbikes.
Okay.
So every day it was like, great, another motorbike video to post on social media today. Fantastic. I even went to a garage for vintage cars, and I got to spend the whole day hanging out with this guy who redid up vintage cars. My sister was like, I'm so jealous. I can't believe you get to hang out with this guy. Oh my God. And I'm like, I'm bored.
Trying to keep your eyes open, right?
Yeah, right? So when I went into business for myself, I was like, I'm not going to work with people like that. I want to work with people that get me excited. Yes, I get to talk about this today rather than another motorbike picture.
Thank goodness we have no motorbike pictures for you today, so you can rest assured on that one. It's a great example, though, of just how important it is to work on and do things. Actually, I wouldn't even call it work, to engage in stuff that you love. Yeah. This is a theme we talk about a lot here on the show, because so often people, particularly where finances are concerned, where they're trying to earn money and so forth, they take on work. And I was one of those people for a long time. Take on work just to get the paycheck without really paying much attention to whether or not they liked it. And the problem, of course, is you burn yourself out doing that in really nasty ways. You can just really burn the crap out of yourself by doing that. Now, on the flip side, there's also the fact that people, justifiably so, get concerned that, well, yeah, but if I'm doing what I love, what if commercializing it actually takes all the love away from it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I've heard that a lot, but if you love what you do, yeah, and you have to take that, the self-care side of things as well, right? So I make sure that I switch off at the weekends, and I don't work evenings, and I don't work Friday afternoons. Like, set those boundaries.
Oh, we're back to boundaries again. Here we go.
Right? There you go. And one of the key things for me when I went into business was making sure that I was setting those boundaries from the start. So rather than when I'm successful, I'm only going to work this much. When I make this much money, I'm going to do this in my business. When I get to this point, I'm going to do this. And I was like, no, I'm going to set all of that stuff up now, because then when I do hit those goals, I'm like, I can set new boundaries and new goals and new things. So even down to how I spend my money, I split it up by percentages so that I said, oh, when I hit this income amount, I'm going to have 8 massages a month. And I was like, right, so now I can afford 1 or 2. Great. So, whatever it is, make sure that you're putting it into life now rather than waiting for when I am, or whatever it is that you're setting that goal to be. When I'm successful, when I get a massive Facebook group, when I make this much money, I'm going to do this. And start putting aside things to make sure that it happens now rather than putting it off.
You have no idea how much you absolutely nailed one of the concepts we talk about a lot here on the show.
Oh, there you go.
That we only have now. We tend to think and live in the past, or sometimes in the future, but we forget to live in the now. Yeah. And what you're talking about is how important it is and why it's so important to live in the now. You gave some really good reasons for that. So thank you for that, for the reinforcement. That's a good thing.
Yeah. I have a massive thing about celebrating, and I get my clients to celebrate everything. Whether you're launching...
Are you sure you're not an LOA advocate? You sound like an LOA devotee. Seriously, this is exactly the kind of stuff we talk about all the time.
There you go. Yeah. I had a client, and I said to her, right, what are you going to do when you've launched? What does that look like for you? And launching is the success, whether anybody signs up or what happens after that, or how many people are in your group or how much money you've made. Launching is the success. What are you going to do? And she joked with me and she goes, I'm going to get a cake with my face on it. And I was like, yes, I am all in for this. Please go get a cake with your face on it. And she did. She sent me a picture and she was like, I did it. Here's my cake. And she got a cake with her face pictured on the front of it for the celebration of her launch.
Well, you actually have brought around to a topic that I knew we had to get to. We've kind of been putting the cart before the horse here, because really, if you're talking about starting something like this, you actually have to start it before you have that audience to talk to have those interchanges and exchanges with. So let's go back to the start, okay? Like you just said, you launched the group. There's nobody in it. That's pretty daunting. Like, well, what am I supposed to do now? I can't talk to somebody if nobody's there. What am I supposed to do? You know, and people can give up pretty easily on that, because, you know, maybe they put up some posts, nobody really shows up. Like, what do? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, so I talk about the 7 different ways you can start to grow a group.
You've counted them. Wow.
Yeah, I'm very system orientated.
I can tell, yeah.
I love a process and a system. So one of the first things is making sure that your group is set up for success. So that is in the name that you use, making sure that the cover image is set up, the description, and the questions when they enter the group are all set up correctly to drive traffic. And what I mean by that is using Facebook as a search engine tool, so that when people search for something and your group comes up. So rather than just naming it, you know, stars, you are naming it stars for those that are interested in laws of attraction.
Okay.
When people are searching for that, your group comes up rather than just the name that your group would never come up then. So making sure that that's optimized, and the cover image tells people what you do as well. So rather than just having a picture of stars, you're telling them what is exactly inside of the group. So that can be a challenge that you're running, that can be any sort of training, that can be what your offer, that can be anything that you are doing inside of your group, so that people know instantly what is inside.
I had to stop for a minute, because I'm saying, why is she thinking of stars? And I realized, she's looking at my background.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Stars. What does stars have to do with it? Oh, yeah. Okay, I get it.
And it's also dark here in the UK already.
Oh,
so
there you go. Okay, yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, optimizing your group is the first step to make sure everything is set up for success. And then making sure that you are building it. One of the things that I do is an outreach program where I am out in other people's groups, and making sure that your personal profile is optimized, because we are nosy as humans. Right? If you are sharing value and information in other people's groups, people are going to come over and be nosy at you. So making sure that your personal profile is then sending people to your group as well.
So that's what optimization means then. It means providing information about who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, exactly. So sharing where they can connect with you further. So whether that's your website, whether that's your Facebook group, whatever that is. Because if you're sharing massive value and somebody's like, oh, well, I love what you just said, they're going to be like, I want to go find out more about him. And they're going to go over to your personal profile. And if you're just some boring person on your personal profile, doesn't have any information, everything is hidden, they'll be like, oh, he might be a weirdo. We'll just skip that one.
or even worse, a troll or a scam artist. It could be any of those things too, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you're curating that content that is publicly available, so that when people are nosy, they can come and do a certain amount of digging to be like, they're not a weirdo. They seem okay. Maybe I'll join their group or add them as a friend or go and check out the website. So that is number 2.
Okay.
Then we've got PR, so press, going out there, doing interviews, connecting with other people like this, sharing about your Facebook group, going into other people's groups, doing lives, sharing value, podcasts, and if you can get it, press, any sort of print articles, anything that goes into people's websites to link back to your Facebook group. Another great way of leveraging your time. If you can connect with 1,000 people easier than one person, great. So using press to do it. Then ads, if you want to run ads, you can totally run ads to Facebook groups. The cost for running ads are around $10 to $15 per new lead that you bring in. So something to be mindful of if you are going to run ads. I've never run ads to my Facebook group. But
plus it's not easy to do, because you can't actually go directly to the group. You have to go through an indirect method.
Yeah. So you have to use lead generation ads or a landing page to capture the information and then send them back. But some of my clients do run them, and they're very successful at them to bring in a lot more people into their group quickly. So ads are a good thing. Then emails, if you can capture people's emails with a lead magnet or a lead generation tool, anything that you have that you can capture their emails and then nurture them to join back into the group. A great way to do it. Lead magnets are super easy if you can nail what people want rather than what they need.
Which is a challenge because you don't have the audience yet.
Yeah. So that comes down to doing market research and asking people what they want to hear from you and how they want to connect with you. So one of my lead magnets, for example, is 11 ways to grow your Facebook group. And they can download a PDF document and they can just access it, but I've got their email address and I can nurture them to go into the community from there. So I use that a lot. Mm-hmm. Then you have challenges and masterclasses. So any sort of live experience inside of your group to bring in a massive amount of people quickly. And you can do that through going into other people's groups and generating interest in a challenge or masterclass that you're running. And again, focusing the challenge or masterclass on what people want rather than what they need and giving them actionable value. So I am not about those friggin' masterclasses that you see all the time where they're like, oh, here are 3 shifts that you can make, and they don't actually teach you anything. And by the end of it, you're like, well, that was a waste of an hour. Right?
Mm-hmm. Never get that hour back.
Yeah. I want to give actionable value that people can learn. And then when they've gone through that hour, they're like, oh my God, you actually know what you're doing. I've inputted this stuff and it works, and I've made some money, or I've had a shift, or I've done something, whatever it is that you're teaching, and get actionable results. And then they're like, okay, now I want to work with you because you have proven that you know what you're talking about. And the last one is getting guest experts into your group. So I have monthly guest experts into my Facebook group where we talk about anything that people would be interested in. And that is to generate more people inside of my group. And when I first launched, it was a lot more often to get more people into my group quickly. And bringing guest experts into your group means that the guest expert will most likely join your group. They will also promote it on other places, and you can share their audience and bring them over to your group and community as well. So that's my 7 ways.
Now, I've already built up my podcast over the years, and I did it extremely organically, to the point of ad nauseum, actually, because I did almost no promotion of any kind. But I've been through all that, and I understand everything that you're describing there because I've been through all of them in one degree or another. And even as I'm hearing it, I'm thinking, I'm exhausted already. Just hearing all that. That is how the heck am I supposed to do all that? That's what the feeling is that I get out of that. How do you streamline this thing?
Yeah, so it's fairly easy once you've got a system and process in place. So when you are doing outreach, for example, I create all of my content in advance. I have years worth of content that I've created.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
A year's worth.
Oh, more than that, because it's
I'm
all
lucky
the
if
content.
I take 2 weeks ahead. I mean, if I can do 2 weeks, I'm doing good.
So, well, once you've created that piece of content, what are you doing that piece of content once it's gone out there? Because that is content that you can reuse.
Okay.
So I have every post that I've ever shared on Facebook stored in a content management system. I use Airtable, but you can use Asana, Trello, anything that you're comfortable with using. And then you can reuse that content in 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, and share it back out again. So
which means that you don't actually have to create everything in advance. You create it over time, carefully, a little bit at a bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're not, because on those days where you are lacking inspiration, because we all have those days, right? Where you're like, I don't have anything to say today.
I'm not going anywhere. Close the doors. I'm done.
Yeah, we all have those days. That's when you can scroll back through your back catalog and be like, oh, I haven't posted that for a while. Somebody will find value in that today. And you just copy paste it and put it back out there into the world. And that is how you streamline things, because then you can start hiring VAs to repurpose that content across multiple channels, because it's already your voice. It's your written content, so that they're not having to recreate the wheel. And that's something that I see a lot of entrepreneurs do, where they're like, oh, I'll just hire a VA and they can create content for me. I'm like, but they're not you. They don't know your ideal client. They don't know your voice. And then they're sat there struggling and scratching their head. Whereas if they have a database of content that you've already created, they're like, oh, I can use that bit and that bit and that bit and recreate content that way. So that makes it a whole lot easier. The same with when you're running challenges or masterclasses. I use the same process and system every single time I run a challenge or masterclass. as I said, I'm very process driven. So everything is
I can tell.
documented, right?
It's very obvious to me how process driven you are. Yes.
Yeah. So everything is documented, what I need to do, when I need to do it. And then I can outsource bits and pieces before I get to it if I want to, or I could make sure I've got time to do it in advance. So everything is systemized. So all of my challenges and masterclass pretty much look the same. It's just the content that I deliver that is different. And therefore everything is just churned out equally.
Well, since I do have some sense of what it is that my audience looks for, I can put myself in their place and say, I'm still overwhelmed. This is like far too much for me to handle. I need this really, really streamlined. Where can I make this a good starting point that is actually going to go somewhere that isn't going to make me feel like I want to throw up?
Yeah. So start with one aspect. Start with one thing and then build on the additional things. So if you know that you don't have a bunch of time and you want to make sure that you are driving people consistently, you can use ads if you've got the money to do so. If you want to make sure that you're using outreach right, then you can start with that and then outsource it. One of my friends has just got a VA to schedule all of her posts into groups. You can't schedule into groups, so the VA has to go into each group every day and post it for her, and then she goes back and engages in that content, which is a great way to leverage that platform and get somebody else to do it for you. The other thing is then stack on each thing. So emails, all my emails are automated. I write one email a week, if that, and people get tons of emails from me because it's all, once they go into the system, it's all built out. But don't make the mistake I did when I first started. I remember listening to a podcast from Amy Porterfield. And I think it was Amy, she said, you have to have a year's worth of email content written out in your sequences. And I was like, I got to go write a year's worth of emails.
Yeah, scary. That's pretty much the reaction that I'm having on behalf of my listeners to some of the stuff you're laying out in your processes. Like, oh my God, this is going to take me 5 years to set this thing up.
Yeah. But just start with one. Start with one email. And then next week, add another one. And if it's a evergreen email that doesn't have any date or specific stuff, add it into your automation. And then next week.
Let's talk about that concept for a second. It's an important concept, the evergreen content, not just emails. It can be evergreen anything. What makes something evergreen? Let's talk about that for just a second.
Yeah, so it can be anything that isn't date or time specific. So if you're talking about Christmas, then that's only going to be used at Christmas, right? But
and it has evergreens, by the way.
Yeah. But remember that Christmas comes around every single year. So although that isn't evergreen every week, it's evergreen for eternity, right? Because Christmas is around next year and the year after and the year after. So if you have a content management system, then you can just put any Christmas content in there. And then when it comes to next Christmas, you've got all of your content already done.
So evergreen basically means that it keeps coming back. It's usable over and over again because people are going to be interested in it over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I can talk about some of the posts that I use that go down really well because I use them so often. And some of my clients that have been following me for a while, they're like, I know you've posted about this before, but this time I heard it.
Well, that's when you know you have a really engaged audience. They actually are aware because you posted them so many times that you've posted it before, and they're paying attention and they're noticing it and they're not pissed off about it. I mean, that's a great combination. That's a warm audience. That's a very warm audience.
Yeah, and that is because sometimes people will see content, and this is an old marketing thing of you have to see something 7 times before you take action on it, right? Yeah. But that piece of knowledge was created like in the 60s or something, whereas nowadays that has got to be much higher. We are so bombarded with so much stuff that has got to be at least double that by now.
I would say, yeah.
Right? So if people see this exact same message from me on email and then see the exact same post from me on Facebook and then see me talk about it on a live, maybe by the time they get the 4th email about the same thing, they'll be like, I'll actually read it now because I'm in the right space, or something's gone on in my life where I need that piece of information, and they'll actually read it and take action on it. Whereas all the other times they've seen it, they're like, oh yeah, Deasha's on one again. She's still talking.
I'll propose an idea. I'm curious to see what you say about this. I'm not even sure it's the number of impressions, because that's what we usually call that in marketing. Those are impressions. I think it's the frequency.
Yeah.
How recently have you heard it? I mean, if I tell you something now and then I tell you the same thing a year from now, it's not very frequent. And if I do that for 7 years in a row, you've gotten 7 impressions, but none of them probably really stuck because they weren't frequent. But if I do it for 7 days in a row, now that's stuck. Now it's like, oh, wow, my God, I can't get away from her. That lady's there again. Oh, my goodness. Probably too much at that point. But the point is, the frequency actually is making the difference, not so much the number, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, talking about law of attraction as well. A lot of my clients come to me and say, you came up so often that it was obvious the universe was trying to tell me that I should work with you. I was like, cool, okay, I'll take it.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Right? I mean, it's just marketing, but I'll take it.
Right. Well, it's both, actually. I mean,
yeah.
It's also the psychology of how we perceive things, too. I mean, it's the red car syndrome, right?
Yeah.
You go out, you shop for a red car, and all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere. It's because the way our brains work, they filter out everything that we can't handle because we can only handle a certain amount. But the stuff we see most recently, okay, we'll start letting that one through, and now all of a sudden we can see it. Even though it was there all along. There were 25,000 red cars, but we didn't see them.
Yeah, exactly. And I get that so often from people saying, you're everywhere. So I decided I had to work with you. Like, okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, this is fun. This is why I say law of attraction applies everywhere. It applies in every aspect. There's no aspect of life where it doesn't apply.
Yeah. Yeah,
and it's nice to know that you actually can apply it when it comes to increasing financial abundance, because that's one of the big 3, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because that can also be a source of a lot of fears. And not just fears, I think there are also some social constraints that go on there too, in that there are a lot of people who believe that so many of the things that are out there are over commercialized, so we shouldn't be commercializing things. And it creates a kind of a mindset where people become afraid to even consider the idea of, well, how can I earn money by doing the thing that I love? Because that's one more form of commercialization, and people are going to get all upset about that and so forth. How do you address that?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of wellness entrepreneurs, this comes up quite a lot with the people that I work with about monetizing what they offer. And one of the things that I say is, if you don't show up and be of service to that person, then where are they going to be in 6 to 12 months if they don't work with you? And what is going to happen to them if they don't work with you? They're going to go and work with somebody else because they still have a need that needs fixing, whatever that is. They still have a need. And if you're showing up and being of value, you're showing them that they have this need, and then you're not showing them how they can work with you to fix it, then they're going to go to the next person who is showing them how they can fix it. And they're going to go and work with them. They might pay more. They might get a shoddier result. They might not get any result. And you have then done them a disservice by not showing them how they can work with you to resolve that issue. And they've gone and worked with somebody else to get the same result, but haven't got the result and wasted all of that money. So if you don't show up and serve, then your clients are missing out.
I don't know if listeners fully grasp how good that answer was, because it hits so many different points that we've been discussing here. First of all, the way you worded it addresses the audience, the way the audience is thinking about it. Second of all, you addressed it in a way that shows how basically the person who you're talking to is valuable. Like, you're important, which is exactly what we want to hear as human beings. So you're addressing that need while you're also answering the question. You're also answering the question in a way that basically stops talking about monetizing, which is another way to kind of detune the whole thing so that it no longer be. I mean, you hit so many different points with that one answer. It was great. And I don't think most people even heard it. It was really well done.
Thank you.
That's how we know we're talking to an expert here. This is really good stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's go through a hypothetical situation. And this actually derives from that previous person we had on the show in November, the fitness person. we had, most of the time I have co-hosts on the show. And I do the show 5 days a week. I have 2 co-hosts each day. And that particular day, one of them was off. The other one was basically a guest from another day who was joining us that day. Her name's Anne Marie. And Anne Marie was kind of listening. She was like paying attention to the dialogue between, myself and, Kelly, who was the guest. And we got to the point where I asked the question about, well, anybody can start a group and monetize it. She agreed. And she decided, let's turn that into a live example right now. I think what she had in mind is I was going to come up with something and we were going to talk about that. But I redirected it to Anne Marie. I said, Anne Marie, you've been listening here. Do you have anything you've ever thought about it'd be kind of cool to do? And she said, yeah, I like to write. She says, it's particularly, I like to write poetry. I'd like to be able to do something with poetry. I'd like to perhaps help other people to become poets, maybe even to become published poets. And that was basically the starting point. And we didn't get real far in it. We got like 2 questions into it. But the way Kelly went about it was she said something like, okay, well, the first thing I would do if I were you is I would start visiting other groups to find out what are people doing? What are they talking about? Because there's bound to be other groups discussing poetry and the writing of poetry. So maybe start engaging and building some relationships there. And that's pretty much how far we got with it. We didn't get much further than that. But it's a good starting point. So I want to kind of revisit there. Let's go back as if we were part of that conversation. What do you think is the next step after that? Okay, I've started to talk to somebody. First of all, why is that so important to talk to those people? We talked earlier about how it's important to just keep putting the same messages out over and over again. Well, let's put that message out over and over again here. Why is that important to engage with people? And then what do you do with that?
So that's where the active listening comes in. So listening to what people say.
Wow, another term from the 70s. I love it.
Right? So it's just listening. If you go into those groups that are specifically for poetry, then you can listen and be a voyeur in that community where you can pick up on keywords that people are using. You can pick up on phrases that people are using, questions that people are asking, and really get to know that audience and what they want to hear from you. However, when it comes to promoting your new group that you've just started out, those are not the groups that you want to be in, because those are the groups where everybody is talking about the same thing. And Russell Brunson, if anybody's heard of ClickFunnels and Russell Brunson, he talks about the difference between the red and the blue oceans. And those groups, those poetry groups, are red oceans. Everybody in there is talking about poetry. Everybody is having questions. So there will be 100 other coaches in there that want to help people with poetry. There will be people that have already bought things and haven't bought things. And it's very much a red ocean. It's shark eat shark. Everybody's on the same thing. However, if you then think about your ideal client as a whole human and everything else that they're interested in, because as a human, we're interested in multiple things. So if you think, okay, moms that like poetry or entrepreneurs that like poetry, where can I go and find those people? So you go and join some mum groups and you go and join some entrepreneurial groups and you start sharing about how poetry has changed your life and how you have been published. You then become the expert in that community, in that blue ocean where nobody else is talking about poetry. You become the person in that community. And from there, everyone's like, that person always talks about poetry. I've been thinking about writing some poetry. I'm going to go and check her out. And then you get the new people in. So they've not spent money on poetry before. They've not invested on anything. They've not really delved into that world, but they're like, ooh, that has sparked my interest. I'm going to go be nosy. I'm going to go check that person out. And you start to build that audience as an expert in that industry rather than trying to compete with all those other people that are in those poetry groups.
I like the way you describe that. In marketing jingo, which of course nobody actually uses in the real world, that's called a unique value proposition. But you say those words and people say, what the heck is that? But the way you described it actually is a whole lot better, because what you're basically saying is, okay, I'm not going to do poetry the way they're doing it. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to orient it around a slightly different audience, and I'm going to draw different people in as a result, because what I'm offering is different from that. That's what makes it unique. What I'm offering is useful. That's the valuable part. And I'm asking that you come in. That's the proposition part, the unique value proposition. That's where that term comes from.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now the term makes a little sense. Thanks for explaining that, Walt. Why didn't you say that the first time?
Yeah.
But it's a big deal because it seems counterintuitive. and I want to make this point really strongly. It seems counterintuitive. If all the people are talking about that over there, why would I want to start something over here that nobody's talking about?
Yeah. And I get that a lot from my clients. Like, but nobody's engaging in my posts and nobody else is talking about this in this community. I'm like, yeah, because you are going to become the expert in that industry then. And everybody's going to know you as the person to talk to. So when I first started my business as a social media manager in 2016, I focused on wellness entrepreneurs. And I was like, I am going to be the social media manager for wellness entrepreneurs. And I talked about it until I was blue in the face. I went everywhere. I spoke about everything everywhere. And most of my business was built on referrals as opposed to that, because people who hadn't even worked with me, had no idea of what working with me was like, would recommend me because they were like, oh, you're a wellness entrepreneur. There's this chick, Deasha, that talks about working with wellness entrepreneurs all the time. She seems really good. You should go and work with her. And they'd come over and work with me because a referral is worth its weight in gold, right? So
absolutely.
Most of my business was therefore built on referrals from people I had never even spoken to. And
which is freaky, by the way, but it's very law of attraction.
Right? And that's because I was showing up consistently, regardless of if anybody was liking or engaging on my content, and showing up and showing the value that I can bring in those blue audiences where nobody else is talking about working with wellness entrepreneurs and social media management, and connecting with those people there. So I was then the expert there.
Wow, that's really good.
It generated massive amount of income.
We've got about 9 minutes left. In the last 9 minutes or so, I want to talk about one last thing, and then I also want to give people the opportunity to find out how to reach out to Deasha in case they're actually interested in getting some help directly one-on-one, which is actually a good idea in almost anything that you do. It's good to have mentors and coaches and teachers and so forth, because otherwise you just, and I again speak from personal experience, lots of personal experience trying to go it on my own. It's miserable doing it that way. It's so much easier when you have somebody you can talk to about it. By the way, that's what this whole connectedness is all about, talking to people. So with that concept in mind, one of the really key things on a broad base about the difference between people who try to go in business and people who don't, between people who try and succeed and those who fail, is self-esteem. And the reason I say that is, the vast majority, and many surveys have shown this, surveys and studies and so forth have shown the vast majority of people have low self-esteem. Yeah. Talk about how important it is to build self-esteem before you even try doing something like this.
Yeah, you have to know that you are good at what you do. And what I get my clients to do is run beta programs so that they can test out what they want to offer. So they can know that they are amazing at what they do. That comes down to a lot of mindset work around knowing that you're good at what you do. And I don't care how big or successful you get, that mindset work is a constant thing, right? And I hear people go, well, I've done my mindset work now. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, this relationship isn't going to last very long, I can tell.
Yeah. I don't need that. I've done it. Well, I'm like, okay, right. It is constantly evolving. And when you hit the next barrier, like, I have to go back and do it again because there are more things to break through and more barriers to knock down. So you are constantly evolving in that self-esteem and growing. And every time you hit a new barrier in your business, you get that I'm not good enough, or I don't know what I'm doing anymore because I've reached a new threshold, and you'll sink back down. And that's where you see that roller coaster image of what entrepreneurship looks like, because people are going through that mindset of ups and downs, of not really knowing what they're doing. So working on your mindset consistently, making sure that your clients are getting results as well. And you can use those. So I had one of my one-on-one clients actually, she came to me and she was like, I just have those days where I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not very good at this. And I said, right, what I want you to do is write down every good thing that any of your clients have ever told you and visually put it all over your desk, so that every time you sit down, you're reminded of how freaking awesome you are and that the things that your clients have told you. So she did that and she was like, oh my God, it's made a massive difference. She's like, every time I sit down with my guests, I'm like, "Ah, I'm so cool. People love me." I'm like, "Yes." And that's then the energy that she brings into working every day. She's like, "Yes, I can see how cool I am because I can visually see all of the feedback that everybody's been giving me."
It makes total sense to me. It's kind of unusual because this is not our normal time for recording a show. But we actually have people in the live stream, which is great. I love it. And we actually have a question from the live stream. So I wanted to share that with you and get your input on it. It's from Gregory, who has recently become a regular listener. He says, I plan to make a channel/Insta with podcasts, music, vlogs, random videos. I don't want to create separate accounts. Is it possible to garner a huge following without one particular niche?
So with that, you can do all of those things and still have one niche, but you want to make sure that whoever you're talking to is consistent. So whatever that person is, you can talk to them in multiple ways. So if you're going to do podcasts, music, vlogs, random videos, as long as all of those things talk to one person, you can have that on one following. If those things are going to talk to multiple different things, so for example, if your music is going to talk to people about food and your random videos are going to talk to people about cats, you can tell the time of day, and I just saw your cat.
He's good at that.
So if those things are going to be different, I mean, of course, if people like cats and they like food, great. But if your stuff is specific to food or specific to cats, then you're going to want to have two different accounts for those, because otherwise you're confusing your audience.
That's a really key thing too, because I think it happens more often than not. People end up thinking they have to appeal to different audiences. They don't think of it necessarily in those terms, but they try to appeal to different audiences. I think out of a feeling of what in LA terms we'd call lack. Like, I can't really get to where I want to, so I have to kind of force the issue a little bit. But that actually works against yourself, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you try and talk to too many people, you end up talking to nobody. Because you're not talking their language, you're not connecting with them, you're trying to be too vague, and then nobody gets what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I've seen posts before where people were like, "Oh, I was trying to sell to everyone." I'm like, so nobody bought, did they? And they're like, "No." Yeah, there you go. Because nobody is connecting with the stuff that you're creating then, rather than if you make it really specific. And I'm very visual. I have a little stick man where I draw all of the language and the words that people are using. So when I see people use new language or new words, because it's constantly evolving, I write it down so I can visually see it. So next time I create content, I can just look at the stick man and say, "Oh, that's what they're struggling with right now. This is what they're struggling with right now," because I visually see it.
Yeah, I can see that too. That's cool. Very cool. Hey, before we part company, let's give people an opportunity to find out where they can meet Deasha, where they can interact with Deasha. Give us some contact points.
Yeah, so you can come and hang out in my Facebook group, Scaling with Deasha. It's organic marketing strategies for entrepreneurs. Or you can check out my podcast, Scaling with Deasha, or you can connect with me on Facebook.
Very cool. I love it. So this has been really worthwhile, very valuable. I'm actually going to be contacting you about other stuff I've got coming up in the future that I think you might be a good fit for. So we'll be doing some offline communication there, and I'll be sure to share videos and so forth so you can have the podcast to share around. I'm also curious about your podcast itself. How long have you been doing that, and what's your focus there?
Yeah, so it's called Scaling with Deasha. It's about scaling your business through multiple ways. I talk to people and I do my own interviews every week, and we talk about all sorts of things around scaling, around mindset, around strategy, everything involved in growing a 6 or 7 figure business.
Wow, you've got it together, Deasha. No doubt in my mind. Absolutely no doubt. I wish I had known at your age what I know.
Yeah.
Because that's what you know. You got it. My life would have been a whole different kettle of fish at that point if I had known that. I'm really impressed. Very, very good.
Thank
really
you.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
We do have another interview coming up tomorrow. You want to tune into also somebody from the UK, from your neighborhood, also a marketer named Luca Senatore. He's going to be on tomorrow, so check into that one. Around actually, it's going to be a much earlier time slot. And then, of course, later on this afternoon, we got Louie and Anne-Marie coming up in a few hours. So if you're checking into the live stream, that's a good place to go for that as well. But in the meantime, Deasha, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing all this great knowledge. I mean, really, really, really good. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, love it. And thank you also to our podcast listeners everywhere, because as I say so often, without you, we would not have a podcast. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.